The forest was quiet that night. The only sound was the crunch of leaves under his boots as Daniel walked toward his cabin. He had been living alone for months, far away from the noise of the city. The cabin was small, old, and surrounded by thick trees. To Daniel, it was a safe place. But on this night, something felt different. As he reached the wooden steps, he noticed the door was not fully closed. He was sure he had locked it in the morning. His hand stopped on the handle. A small chill ran down his spine. Slowly, he pushed the door open and the old hinges made a soft creak. Inside, the air was warmer than usual, and there was a faint smell, something sweet and metallic, unlike anything he had smelled before. He stepped inside carefully, his eyes moving across the small room. The cabin had only one table, 2 chairs, and a bed in the corner. At first, everything looked normal, but then he saw it. A loaf of bread that he had left untouched the day before was now half-eaten. His knife, which usually stayed on the table, was lying on the floor. The kettle on the stove was slightly out of place, as if someone had touched it. Daniel's heart began to beat faster. He whispered to himself, "Someone's been here." He moved slowly, checking each corner. His boots pressed against the wooden floorboards, making them creak under his weight. He opened the cupboard, empty. He looked under the bed, nothing. For a moment he thought maybe it was an animal, maybe a raccoon or a stray dog. But then he noticed something impossible. On the wooden floor near the fireplace were footprints. Bare footprints, small, delicate, but strange. They were too long, the toes too sharp, and they seemed to glow faintly under the light of the lantern. Daniel froze. His breath caught in his throat. "What the hell?" he muttered. He followed the prints with cautious steps. They led to the back of the cabin near a pile of firewood stacked against the wall. Something shifted in the shadows. A faint sound like a soft hum filled the room. Daniel grabbed the lantern and raised it higher. His eyes widened. In the corner, crouched low, was a figure. At first glance it looked like a woman, her body thin and fragile. But her skin was pale, almost silver in the lantern light, and faint patterns like glowing veins ran along her arms and neck. Her eyes were wide and shining, glowing faintly like 2 small stars. She pressed herself against the wall, trying to hide in the shadows. Daniel froze. His mind screamed to run, but his body wouldn't move. The woman looked at him with pure fear, like a hunted animal. She did not speak, only held her hands up as if begging him not to come closer. The silence was heavy, broken only by the sound of Daniel's heartbeat in his ears. He swallowed hard. Who are you?" he whispered. The woman didn't answer. She shook her head quickly, her strange eyes darting toward the door as if she was ready to escape. Her hair, dark and tangled, fell over her face. She pulled her knees to her chest, curling tighter into the corner. Daniel noticed something else. On her leg was a deep cut, glowing faintly with blue light. It looked painful, but instead of blood there was a strange shimmer like liquid light slowly moving across the wound. She covered it quickly with her hand when she realized he was looking. He stepped back, trying to understand. His mind raced. She was not normal, not human, and yet she looked human enough to confuse him. The fear in her eyes was real. The pain on her face was real. Daniel's breathing grew heavier. He thought about running out the door, leaving everything behind. But something inside him held him in place. He wanted answers. "You've been living here." "Haven't you?" he said softly, almost to himself. "In my cabin." Her eyes flickered as if she understood a little. She shook her head again and whispered something too faint to catch. Her voice was soft, broken, like the sound of wind through trees. Daniel felt his throat go dry. He realized this was no thief, no traveler, no ordinary woman. She was something else, something not from this world. For a long moment they stared at each other. Neither moved. The lantern flickered and the shadows seemed to grow deeper around them. Daniel finally took a slow step backward. He didn't want to frighten her more than she already was. But the questions burned inside him. Who was she? Why was she here? And why did she look at him as if she was hiding from something worse than him? He glanced toward the window. Outside, the forest was dark and silent, but in the distance he thought he saw a faint red light moving between the trees. Almost like someone or something was searching. He turned back to the strange woman. She had pressed herself tighter against the wall, her glowing eyes never leaving his face. Daniel whispered again, almost trembling. "You're not human, are you?" The woman closed her eyes and shook her head once, very slowly. In that moment, Daniel felt the world tilt. His safe, quiet cabin was no longer his own. It was now a place of secrets, of danger, and of something far bigger than he had ever imagined. And he knew, deep in his heart, that nothing would ever be the same again. Daniel stood frozen in the middle of the room, his eyes locked on the strange woman crouched in the corner. She was breathing fast, her chest rising and falling as if every breath was a struggle. The glowing patterns on her skin pulsed faintly like light moving underwater. Her eyes, bright and strange, refused to leave his face. For a moment, neither of them moved. Daniel's mind spun in circles. She looked like a woman, fragile and frightened, but everything about her was wrong. Her wounds glowed, her skin shimmered faintly, and she made no sound except for the quiet hum that seemed to come from her very body. Daniel swallowed hard. You don't belong here," he whispered. The woman pressed her back against the wall as if she could sink into it. She shook her head quickly, strands of dark hair falling into her glowing eyes. Her lips moved, but no words came. She only lifted one trembling hand, palm out, as though begging him not to come closer. Daniel raised his own hand slowly, showing he meant no harm. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said softly. His voice was calm, though his heart was pounding so loudly he thought she could hear it. Still, she didn't answer. Her gaze flickered toward the door, then to the window like a trapped animal searching for an escape. She shifted slightly, and Daniel noticed again the wound on her leg. The glow around it was weaker now, but it looked painful. He thought about stepping closer to help her, but every time he moved an inch, she flinched, her muscles tightening as if she expected an attack. Daniel forced himself to step back. "Fine," he muttered. "You don't trust me, I get it. But you can't stay like that. Whoever you are, you're hurt, and—" His voice dropped lower. "I think someone's looking for you." Her head snapped up at those words. Her strange eyes widened, glowing brighter for a moment. She shook her head furiously and pressed a finger to her lips, signaling him to be quiet. Daniel blinked in confusion, but then he heard it too. A faint sound outside, the crunch of leaves, the hum of engines far off in the forest. Someone or something was moving out there. Daniel's throat went dry. He stepped to the window and peeked through the cracks in the shutters. In the distance, faint beams of light swept between the trees, as if flashlights or search lamps were moving closer. He turned back to her. "They're searching," he whispered. "For you, aren't they?" She pressed herself tighter against the wall. Her body trembled, her lips forming silent words he could not understand. Her fear was real, heavy and sharp. Daniel could feel it filling the room like smoke. He wanted to ask 1,000 questions. Who was she? Why was she here? Why did soldiers seem to be searching for her? But none of those questions mattered now. What mattered was the danger growing closer outside. Daniel blew out the lantern, plunging the cabin into darkness. Only her faint glow lit the room now. He crouched low and whispered, "Stay quiet. Don't move." The woman's breathing slowed a little, though her eyes still glistened with fear. She curled her arms tighter around her knees and closed her eyes as if trying to disappear completely. Minutes crawled by. The sounds outside grew louder, closer. Voices carried through the trees, short, sharp commands in English. Boots crunched on leaves. At one point, a flashlight beam cut across the cabin window, and Daniel held his breath. He glanced at her. Her glowing patterns dimmed, almost vanishing, as if she was trying to hide her light. She held her breath too, her body so still she looked like a statue. Finally, the footsteps faded, the voices grew distant, and the forest grew silent once more. Daniel let out the breath he had been holding. He lit the lantern again, its warm glow filling the room. The woman slowly opened her eyes, watching him carefully. Daniel leaned against the table, wiping sweat from his forehead. "You're running," he said quietly. "From them." She stared at him, her expression unreadable. After a long moment, she opened her mouth. A soft, broken sound came out. A word, "I'd." Daniel stiffened. His heart leaped. She spoke. "Not much, but enough to understand. You're hiding," he repeated. "From them?" She nodded quickly, her hair falling over her face. Her voice was weak, her accent strange, but the word was clear enough. Daniel felt a wave of unease wash over him. Whoever they were close. And if they found her here, they would not leave him alive either. Still, he couldn't bring himself to push her out. She was terrified, injured, and desperate. Something about her fear stirred something in him, an instinct to protect even if he didn't understand why. He sighed heavily and rubbed his face. "All right," he said at last. "You can stay. Just stay quiet. Don't run." Her glowing eyes softened just slightly, though she still trembled. She looked at him as if she wanted to trust him but didn't know how. Slowly, carefully, she lowered her head, resting her forehead against her knees. Daniel turned toward the window again. The forest was silent now, but he knew it would not last. Whoever was hunting her would return. They would search every cabin, every shadow, until they found what they wanted. And now she was here. Inside his cabin. Inside his life, Daniel clenched his fists. He had lived in peace and silence, far from the world. But now, with one strange visitor, everything had changed. And deep inside, he knew he had just stepped into something far greater and far more dangerous than he could ever imagine. The cabin was still in the hours after midnight. Daniel sat at the edge of his bed, staring at the strange woman curled up in the corner. The lantern glowed faintly, and in that dim light her skin shimmered with a soft silver glow. She hadn't moved in a long while, only breathed quietly, her knees drawn close to her chest. Daniel couldn't sleep. His mind kept racing with questions. Who was she? Where had she come from? Why were soldiers, if that's what they were, searching the forest? The more he thought, the more restless he became. He stood and paced the small room, glancing at her every few steps. She didn't look dangerous, but neither did she look human. Finally, he stopped pacing. "I need answers," he said aloud, though his voice was soft. Her eyes flickered open at the sound. She looked at him with the same mix of fear and mistrust. Daniel raised his hand slowly as he had before. "I'm not going to hurt you," he whispered. "But you need to talk to me. You can speak, can't you?" For a moment she only stared. Then slowly she nodded. Daniel's heart jumped. "Good," he said quickly. "Then tell me, who are you?" The woman's lips parted. A word came out, broken and faint, her accent sharp and strange. Lyra." Daniel blinked. "Lyra?" She nodded again, her voice trembling. "My name. Lyra." He repeated it under his breath, almost to test the sound. It felt strange in his mouth, but it was a name. "All right, Lyra," he said carefully. "Now tell me, why are you here? What are you hiding from?" Her glowing eyes darted to the window, then back to him. She seemed to struggle with the words, her mouth moving slowly, as though English was heavy and unfamiliar. Finally, she whispered, Not safe here," Daniel frowned. "Not safe? You mean those people in the forest?" Her breathing quickened. She pressed her hands to her chest, shaking her head. "Humans, no others. Worse," Daniel froze. "Others?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached slowly into the folds of the torn cloth wrapped around her body. Daniel stiffened, ready to move if she pulled out a weapon. But what she brought out was small and strange. It was a device no larger than a deck of cards, glowing faintly blue. Its surface seemed alive, shifting like liquid metal. Strange symbols pulsed across it, symbols Daniel had never seen before. Lyra held it gently, almost with reverence. She lifted it so Daniel could see. "Proof," she whispered. Daniel stepped closer, his eyes fixed on the object. "What is that?" She shook her head, struggling again to form words. "Home, star, ship, machine." Daniel's chest tightened. He didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was glowing in front of him. This was no piece of human technology. It looked far beyond anything he had ever seen. "You're telling me," he swallowed hard. "You're not from Earth." Her eyes locked onto his, steady and unblinking now. She shook her head slowly. "No." The word hit him like a hammer. His knees felt weak. For years he had lived in quiet isolation, believing the world was small, predictable, dull. Now in one night it had opened into something terrifying and vast. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, trying to process. "So you're an alien, from another world, and you're hiding here." She nodded once. Then she pressed the glowing device to her chest and whispered, "Please." "Hide me, don't tell." Daniel stared at her. The fear in her voice was real. The desperation in her eyes was real. But his own fear boiled beneath the surface. If what she said was true, if she wasn't human, then helping her could destroy him. He stepped back, pacing the room again. "Do you have any idea what you're asking?" he hissed. "They're out there searching, soldiers, hunters, I don't even know who they are, but if they find you here, I'm finished. You understand? They'll kill me too." Lyra flinched, clutching the device tighter. Her voice broke as she spoke again. "Please, I beg, no hurt. I only hide." Her words echoed in the small cabin. Daniel stopped pacing. He looked at her, really looked. Despite her glowing skin, her strange device, her otherworldly presence, she looked human, scared, alone, just like anyone else hunted by forces they couldn't fight. Daniel let out a long breath. His voice softened. "Why me? Why my cabin?" Her gaze lowered. "Crash," she whispered. "Ship. Broken. Lost." She gestured weakly toward the forest. "Here." "I hide. You—" "Find." Daniel rubbed his face. It was insane, impossible. Yet he couldn't deny what was in front of him. She wasn't lying. She couldn't be. Outside, the distant thrum of helicopters echoed through the trees. Searchlights swept across the night sky. Daniel stiffened and turned toward the window. Lyra pressed herself against the wall, fear flashing in her glowing eyes. She whispered urgently, "They come." "They find." Daniel's stomach twisted. He grabbed the lantern and blew it out, plunging the cabin back into darkness. "Stay quiet," he whispered harshly. "Stay hidden." The sounds outside grew louder, engines, footsteps, voices calling through the forest. The search was closing in. Daniel crouched low, his mind spinning. He had a choice to make. He could hand her over, pretend he never saw her, and maybe survive. Or he could protect her, protect something not of this earth, and risk everything. Lyra clutched the device to her chest, her glowing eyes wide, pleading. Daniel swallowed hard, sweat dripping down his brow. He whispered to himself, "God help me. What am I getting into?" And as the searchlights cut across the cabin walls, Daniel knew the night was far from over. The real danger was only just beginning. The forest outside the cabin was alive with noise. Engines rumbled in the distance, dogs barked faintly, and searchlights cut through the trees like white spears. Daniel crouched near the window, his breath shallow, while Lyra huddled in the corner, clutching her strange device to her chest. Her glowing patterns had dimmed almost completely, as though her body itself knew how to hide. Daniel's hands were damp with sweat. Every sound outside felt too close. He had lived in this cabin for years, far away from the world, and never once had soldiers come this deep into the woods. But tonight it was different. Tonight they were hunting. The crunch of boots grew louder. Daniel's stomach tightened. A sharp knock shook the door, echoing through the small cabin. "Open up," a voice barked. Daniel froze. He glanced at Lyra. She shook her head violently, her strange eyes wide with terror. She slid silently across the floor and pressed herself beneath the bed, vanishing into the shadows. Her device dimmed until its glow was almost gone. The knock came again, harder this time. "Open the door, now!" Daniel wiped his palms on his pants and forced himself to breathe. He had no choice. If he didn't open it, they would break it down. He walked slowly to the door and unlatched it. The wood groaned as it swung open. On the other side stood two men in dark uniforms. Their faces were hard, their eyes sharp under the glare of flashlights. Rifles hung across their chests, and a black insignia Daniel didn't recognize was stitched on their shoulders. Behind them, more lights flickered in the trees, and the faint shadows of other soldiers moved between the branches. The taller one stepped forward. "We're searching the area," he said flatly. "Have you seen anything unusual tonight?" Daniel's mouth felt dry. He shook his head. "No, just me here." "What's going on?" The soldier's gaze slid past him into the cabin. His flashlight beam swept across the room, the table, the stove, the empty chair. Daniel fought the urge to look toward the bed. He forced himself to stand still, his face calm. The second soldier stepped closer. "Reports say something came down in these woods. Maybe a crash. Maybe something else. We've been tracking signals that led near this cabin. You sure you haven't seen anything strange?" Daniel swallowed. His voice came out steady, though his chest was tight. "I haven't seen a thing. Just trees and deer, same as always." The taller soldier narrowed his eyes. He took another step inside, the wooden floor creaking under his boots. His flashlight beam passed dangerously close to the bed where Lyra hid. Daniel's heart hammered against his ribs. The soldier paused. For a long moment, he simply listened to the silence of the cabin. Then he turned back to Daniel. "If you see anything, anyone, you report it immediately. Do you understand?" Daniel nodded quickly. "Of course." The man studied him for another tense second before lowering his light. Without another word, he turned and walked out into the night. The second soldier gave Daniel a long, suspicious look, then followed. Daniel shut the door behind them, his hands trembling. He stood in silence, listening as the crunch of boots faded back into the forest. Slowly, a shadow moved beneath the bed. Lyra crawled out, her silver skin faintly glowing again. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, her eyes wet with fear. She looked at him as though expecting anger. Daniel pressed a hand against his forehead, trying to steady his breathing. "That was too close," he whispered. Lyra hugged the strange device to her chest. Her voice shook as she spoke. "They hunt me. They find him soon." Daniel looked at her sharply. "Who are they? Military? Government?" She shook her head quickly. "Not. Your people work with them. Together." Her broken English made his head spin, but the meaning was clear enough. Whoever those soldiers were, they weren't acting alone. Something else was guiding them. Daniel turned toward the window again. In the distance, the forest glowed faintly with moving lights. The search wasn't over. They would be back, he muttered under his breath. "Why me? Why my cabin?" When he looked back at her, she was trembling. For the first time, he noticed her eyes weren't just glowing. They were filled with sorrow. "Nowhere else," she whispered. "Only here, please." Daniel felt a strange pull in his chest. She wasn't lying. She wasn't pretending. She was desperate. He knew if he threw her out now, she would be caught within minutes. He sighed heavily, rubbing the back of his neck. "All right," he said. "You can stay, but we need a plan. They'll come back, and next time I might not be able to lie my way out of it." Lyra looked at him with something close to relief. She lowered her head, her glowing patterns flickering softly across her skin. For the first time, she almost looked calm, but Daniel wasn't calm. As he turned toward the table, something caught his eye through the crack in the window. Lying half buried in the dirt outside the cabin was a small, glowing shard, pulsing faintly like the device in Lyra's hands. Daniel's chest tightened. He stepped closer to the window, his heart pounding. It wasn't just a shard. It looked like some kind of tracker, and it was glowing brighter with each passing second. He whispered under his breath, "They'll know. They'll know exactly where you are." Behind him, Lyra stiffened, her eyes widening as she realized what he had seen. The hunters weren't gone. They were circling, and soon they would come back for her. Daniel's eyes stayed fixed on the glowing shard outside the cabin window. The light pulsed brighter with every passing second like a heartbeat. It wasn't just a piece of metal, it was a signal, a beacon calling the hunters straight to them. His stomach twisted. He turned quickly toward Lyra. She was standing now, trembling, her strange device clutched tightly against her chest. Her glowing eyes followed his gaze, and the moment she saw the tracker, her face filled with dread. "No, no," she whispered, shaking her head. "They find me." Daniel cursed under his breath. "We can't stay here. If they follow that thing, they'll know exactly where you are." Lyra took a shaky step forward. "We go now. Let's go." Daniel nodded, though fear gnawed at him. Running into the forest in the middle of the night while armed men, and maybe worse, were hunting them, felt insane. But staying was certain death. He grabbed his old backpack from under the bed and began stuffing it with whatever supplies he could find. A flashlight, matches, canned food, a water flask. His hands moved fast, his body fueled by pure panic. Lyra moved closer, still clutching her device. She glanced at the backpack, then at him, her expression confused. "Why, help me?" she asked, her voice trembling but clear enough. Daniel froze for a moment. Why was he helping her? He didn't know. He only knew that leaving her behind wasn't an option. He zipped the bag shut and slung it over his shoulder. "I don't have a choice," he muttered. "If they catch you here, I'm done too. So if we're running together." She blinked at him, surprised. Then slowly she nodded. The sounds outside grew louder. Boots crunching leaves, voices barking orders, searchlights slicing through the trees. Time was running out. Daniel extinguished the lantern and pulled the door open carefully. Cold night air rushed in. The forest stretched out in front of them, dark and endless. Between the trees, beams of light moved steadily closer. He turned to Lyra. "Stay low. Stay quiet. Follow me." She nodded once, her glowing patterns dimming almost completely until only her strange eyes shone faintly in the dark. Together, they slipped into the forest, the night wrapped around them like a heavy cloak. Daniel led the way, moving quickly but carefully, his boots sinking into damp leaves and moss. Lyra followed close behind, her steps surprisingly light, almost silent. Every few minutes, Daniel glanced back. She was there, always close, her face tense but determined. For someone so frightened, she moved with grace, almost like she belonged to the forest itself. Behind them, the search grew louder. Dogs barked, soldiers shouted. Beams of light swept across the trees. Daniel's chest burned with every breath, but he forced himself to keep moving. They reached a small clearing where the moonlight broke through the branches. Daniel stopped for a moment, catching his breath. Lyra stood beside him, clutching her device so tightly her knuckles turned white. Daniel turned to her. "What are they after? Why are they chasing you?" Her lips trembled. For a moment she didn't answer, but then she whispered, "This." She held up the glowing device. Its light pulsed faintly, alive, strange symbols shifting across its surface. Inside, something they want. Something bad must not fall in wrong hands, Daniel frowned. "What is it?" Her glowing eyes met his. Power, weapon, control. The words hit him like a weight. He realized this wasn't just about her survival. It was about something bigger, something dangerous. If those soldiers got the device, whatever it contained could change everything. Daniel cursed softly. "Great. So we're not just running from men with guns. We're running from people who want to use your weapon." Lyra's expression darkened. "Not just people. Others too. My kind." Daniel froze. "Your own people are hunting you?" She nodded slowly, pain flickering across her face. "They want Earth, want control. Escape." Daniel felt the ground shift beneath his feet. He had suspected she was different, but hearing it confirmed chilled him to the bone. She wasn't just a lost alien. She was a fugitive carrying something that could doom the world. Before he could reply, a sudden bark of a dog echoed through the forest. A searchlight cut across the clearing, blinding them for a second. "Run!" Daniel hissed. They darted back into the shadows, crashing through bushes and weaving between trees. Branches whipped against Daniel's face, but he didn't stop. Behind them, voices shouted. Dogs barked louder, and the sound of boots thundered against the ground. Daniel's lungs burned, but he pushed harder, every muscle screaming. Lyra kept pace beside him, her face pale but determined. She moved with uncanny speed, her bare feet barely making a sound on the forest floor. Finally, after what felt like forever, they stumbled into a ravine where a fallen log stretched across a stream. Daniel grabbed Lyra's arm and pulled her across. The cold water rushed below, the noise masking their footsteps. On the other side, they collapsed behind a cluster of rocks, both gasping for air. The shouts and barking grew fainter, though the searchlight still swept the trees above. Daniel pressed his back against the stone, his chest heaving. "They're not stopping," he whispered. "They'll keep coming until they find us." Lyra clutched the device tighter, her glowing eyes reflecting fear and sorrow. "Then, we must not let them." Daniel turned to her, his jaw tight. "If this thing you're carrying is as dangerous as you say, we need a real plan. Running won't be enough. We need to get rid of that tracker before it brings them straight to us again." She nodded slowly, her face set with quiet determination. "We'd destroy it soon." Daniel looked out at the forest, his heart pounding. The hunters were close, and dawn was only a few hours away. They had bought themselves time, but not much. The real fight was only just beginning. The forest was quiet again, but Daniel knew silence didn't mean safety. He crouched behind the rocks, listening to the faint hum of helicopters far above and the distant bark of dogs fading into the night. Lyra sat beside him, her silver skin glowing faintly in the moonlight. She held the strange device close, her eyes fixed on the dark trees ahead. Daniel rubbed his face with a trembling hand. His body was exhausted, but his mind refused to slow down. He whispered, "We can't keep running forever. They'll find us sooner or later." Lyra turned her head toward him. "Yes?" she said softly, her voice broken but clearer than before. "Soon they will not stop," Daniel frowned. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Tell me the truth. What's in that thing you're carrying? Why risk everything to keep it out of their hands?" Lyra's glowing eyes dimmed. She looked down at the device, her hands tightening around it as though she feared it might slip away. "Inside, code, map, weapon." Her words were halting, heavy. "If they use, Earth will fall, my people will rule." Daniel's stomach turned. He had guessed it was dangerous, but hearing it confirmed made the weight on his chest heavier. "So you're saying your people want to invade?" She nodded slowly, her voice breaking. "Yes, they come to control, to make slaves." Daniel stared at her in disbelief. She wasn't just hiding for herself, she was hiding to protect humanity. And now, by helping her, he was tangled in something that could decide the future of the whole planet. Before he could respond, a sharp crack of branches snapped the silence. Daniel's head whipped around. A shadow moved in the trees. His heart leaped. "Stay down," he whispered, pulling Lyra closer against the rocks. But it was too late. A figure emerged from the shadows, a soldier in black uniform. His rifle was already raised. The beam of his flashlight blinded Daniel, freezing him in place. "Don't move!" the soldier barked. Lyra gasped and clutched the device tighter. The soldier stepped closer, his gun aimed directly at her. His voice was hard. "So it's true, we were told something was out here, and you've been hiding her." He spat at Daniel. "Big mistake." Daniel's mind raced. He raised his hands slowly. "Wait, you don't understand." But before he could finish, Lyra moved. Her body glowed suddenly brighter, the strange patterns across her skin flaring like fire. She lifted one trembling hand toward the soldier. A wave of energy burst from her palm. It wasn't fire or lightning, but something different, like invisible force bending the air. The soldier was thrown backward, crashing into a tree with a scream. His rifle flew from his hands, landing in the dirt. Daniel's jaw dropped. He turned to Lyra in shock. What the hell was that? Her breathing was heavy, her glow flickering like a fading flame. She lowered her hand slowly, her eyes filled with pain. "My power," she whispered. "Part of me. Part of why they want me." Daniel bent to grab the soldier's rifle, his hands shaking. The man groaned weakly against the tree, unconscious but alive. Daniel turned back to Lyra, his voice sharp. "You could have told me. You're not just running. You're carrying some kind of weapon inside yourself, aren't you?" Lyra shook her head quickly, tears in her glowing eyes. "Not weapon. I was born different. Stronger. They want me to use me." Daniel's breath caught. She wasn't just carrying a device, they wanted her. Her power. Her life. She hugged the device tightly, her voice breaking. "I was chosen to study humans, to learn. But when I saw plan, I could not obey. I escaped. I ran. Now they hunt me." Daniel felt the world tilt. He looked down at the unconscious soldier, then back at her. He wanted to be angry for dragging him into this. He wanted to scream at her for hiding the truth. But when he looked at her trembling figure, her sorrow-filled eyes, he felt only pity. "You're telling me," he said slowly, "you came here as a spy, but now you're trying to stop your own people." She nodded, her voice little more than a whisper. "Yes. If they win, your world ends. Your people suffer. I cannot let it happen." Daniel leaned back against the rock, his head spinning. He had wanted a quiet life in the forest, far from the chaos of the world. But now, sitting beside a hunted alien carrying the key to Earth's survival, he realized there was no going back. The soldier groaned again, shifting weakly. Daniel tightened his grip on the rifle, then turned to Lyra. "If what you say is true, then we can't just run. We need to destroy that beacon of theirs before your people arrive." Lyra's eyes widened. "Yes, the beacon. They call. Ships will come." Daniel's chest tightened. The words made it real. They weren't just being hunted by men in the forest. An invasion could be coming from the sky. Above them, the faint hum of helicopters grew louder again. Lyra pressed herself against the rocks, her voice shaking. Too late. They already know. The signal. Sent. Daniel clenched his jaw, his mind racing. He had no reason to trust her. She had hidden the truth, dragged him into danger, nearly gotten him killed. But now, he understood the choice in front of him. He could walk away, hand her to the soldiers, and try to pretend none of this was real. Or he could fight beside her, against men, against aliens, against impossible odds. He looked into her glowing eyes. They were filled with fear, but also hope. Daniel tightened his grip on the rifle. "Then we fight. Lyra's glow brightened just slightly. She gave the faintest nod, as if she had been waiting for those words. Above them, the night sky pulsed with an eerie glow. A new light shimmered between the stars, growing brighter with each second. The ships were coming. The night sky burned with strange light. Daniel stared upward, his chest tightening as glowing shapes began to descend from the stars. They weren't helicopters. They weren't planes. They were ships, massive, silent and alive with energy that rippled across the dark sky. Beside him, Lyra clutched her strange device, her silver skin glowing brighter now, as though it responded to the presence of the ships above. Her voice shook when she spoke. "They come, my people, if beacon not destroyed. Earth is lost." Daniel gripped the stolen rifle tighter, his knuckles white. He had never believed in aliens, never believed in war beyond human greed. But now, watching those lights grow larger in the sky, he realized the truth. Humanity was standing on the edge of something far worse. He turned to Lyra. "Then where's the beacon? How do we stop it?" Her glowing eyes met his. "Close, in forest, hidden with soldiers. We must go now." Daniel nodded sharply. He forced his tired body to move, every step fueled by pure adrenaline. Together they ran through the dark woods, guided only by the faint pulse of Lyra's device. The forest was alive with movement, soldiers shouting, dogs barking, searchlights sweeping. But now the danger wasn't just on the ground. Above, the sky rumbled with alien thunder. At last they broke into a clearing. In the center stood a strange machine, taller than a man, glowing with the same symbols as Lyra's device. Soldiers stood guard around it, their rifles ready, their faces hard. The beacon pulsed with light, sending waves of energy into the sky. Daniel ducked behind a fallen log, pulling Lyra down with him. "That's it," he whispered. "That thing's calling your people here." Lyra nodded quickly. "Yes, must destroy, before ships arrive fully." Daniel studied the guards. There were too many, too armed. He knew they couldn't fight them all, not with one rifle and desperation. But if they didn't try, the world was finished. His pulse raced. He turned to Lyra. "If we take that beacon out, what happens?" She hesitated. Then she whispered, "Maybe they cannot land. Maybe they turn back. But risk. Big." Daniel drew in a sharp breath. Risk. That was all he had been living since she appeared in his cabin. But now, the risk was for more than his life. It was for Earth, for everyone. He steadied his breathing. "Then we do it." Before Lyra could respond, a voice shouted. A flashlight beam cut across the log, blinding them. "There, by the rocks!" Gunfire erupted. Bullets tore into the wood above Daniel's head. He dropped flat, his heart pounding. Lyra cried out, clutching her device tightly. Daniel raised the rifle and fired blindly into the dark, forcing the soldiers to duck. "Go," he shouted. "Run to the beacon." Lyra hesitated, fear flashing in her eyes. But then she nodded. With a sudden burst of speed, she leapt from the log and ran toward the beacon. Her silver glow made her a target, but she moved like light itself, weaving between bullets, her glowing patterns flaring with every step. Daniel followed close behind, firing at the guards, his ears ringing from the shots. One soldier fell. Another dropped back, calling for reinforcements. The clearing was chaos. Lyra reached the beacon. She pressed her device against its surface, the two machines connecting instantly. Symbols blazed across both, and the beacon's light pulsed faster, wilder. Daniel dove behind a crate, shouting, "Hurry! Shut it down!" Lyra's voice broke as she cried out, "It resists! It fights me!" Her body shook as the device in her hands burned with energy. Her glow spread brighter and brighter until Daniel could barely look at her. The beacon roared like a living thing. Beams of light shot into the sky, and the ships above responded, their forms clearer now, their size terrifying. Daniel's gut twisted. He saw it. The invasion was seconds away. He raised his rifle again, but what could bullets do against something from the stars? Then Lyra turned her glowing eyes toward him. Tears shimmered there, even through the light. Daniel, choice. He stared at her, confused. What do you mean? Her voice was soft but firm. If I give all power, I can destroy Beacon. But I will not live. Daniel's chest froze. No. There has to be another way. She shook her head slowly. No time. You must choose. Let me end it, or save me, and Earth will fall. The words hit him harder than any bullet. His throat burned. He barely knew her, an alien, a stranger who had stumbled into his life. And yet in these few nights, he had seen her fear, her courage, her humanity. He couldn't imagine letting her die, but above them the sky split open. The alien ships began to descend. Daniel clenched his teeth, his eyes burning, his voice cracked. Do it. Save Earth. Lyra gave a small, trembling smile. Thank you. Then she pressed her hands against the beacon, her entire body blazing with light. The clearing shook as the machine screamed, its glowing core tearing apart. The soldiers scattered, shouting in terror. Daniel shielded his eyes as the beacon exploded in a blinding wave. For a moment, the forest itself seemed to vanish in white light. When the blast faded, the clearing was silent. The beacon lay in ruins, shattered into smoking shards. The soldiers were gone, fleeing into the trees. Above, the alien ships flickered and then retreated, their lights vanishing into the night sky. Daniel staggered to his feet, his ears ringing. His eyes searched desperately. Lyra? But she was gone. Only her device lay on the ground, cracked but still glowing faintly. Daniel dropped to his knees, clutching it in his hands. His chest ached with a hollow pain. She had saved them. She had saved him. But the cost had been everything. He looked up at the stars, his voice breaking. She will return. I know she will. The forest was quiet once more. But Daniel's world had changed forever.